rather, or what we will be doing is that I will show you one part and then you will be making another similar part on your own. So I'll give you time, whatever, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever is needed for that coding. I'll give you that time here in the session itself, and I would hopefully expect you to code along and try it out. Then I'll give you the solution, and then we'll move to the next part. So that's effectively how I want the revision sessions to go, because I really want you to code along with me this time, right? Because we have learned these things and now it's time to just revise them. So none of what we discuss is going to be brand new. It'll be everything similar. Like, we know what HTML is, we know what CSS is, and we have talked about it. So we'll just spend some time making 3 projects, one in each session. So again, 2 sessions this week and one session the following week. So that wraps up our curriculum. And yes, so the first session will be focused on the UI aspects, because that's what we started with. And the next 2 sessions will be more backend and functionality driven. So we'll have one session on Python, and then the final session again on Django. And we'll be trying to create projects using Django in all 3. But again, the focus in this one is not Django. The focus is the UI and how Django works with the UI, right? Django is one of those few frameworks that actually allows us to respond with a front end as well. And if you go to a JavaScript setup, again, we have Node and Express, which also let us do something similar. So we can create something called a template and we can return that to the user, which is exactly what we'll be doing here as well, right? So even in the case of Django, it is possible that we can return some UI elements on the screen, and that's what we'll look at. So we'll build these UI elements first with HTML, and then we'll see how can we connect them and show them on the screen, right? However, having said that, it is also important to note that most commonly, in real world scenarios, you might probably use another front end framework, and then Django is mostly used exclusively for backend in most cases. So you will not see a lot of Django based UI projects, even though it is possible, but it's not as, let's say, powerful as some other frameworks, right? In terms of the front end aspect, it's really powerful for the backend, but not so much for the front end, right? But either way, we are going to explore it today. So let's jump in and get started with this. So I'll just share my screen again, and there we go. So now, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, what we are going to build, right? So this is what we are looking at building here. If you see my screen now, so it's basically a very simple resume kind of a thing. We'll not build so many fields, but like one or like 3, 4 things out of these, and then you go to the submit option. So we will see how to add form validation with the attributes and all of that. So we'll explore the form in a little more detail today, right? Then we'll, once all the details are filled, we submit the form. So it gives us this template wherein whatever data we have written will be shown there, right? So if I just write something here, just some random things, then it should ideally carry forward. You can see, carry forward to the next screen. You can see the about, you can see the email, right? And then there should be a button which allows us to download a PDF. So this will download that resume which we are creating as a PDF. So there are going to be 2, 3 really interesting things, right? So that's what our focus is for today's session. So again, we'll focus more on integrating HTML, CSS. We'll focus more on HTML forms. We did not cover them in a lot of detail earlier, so we'll do that along the way while recapping other elements in HTML as well, right? So yes, let's go ahead and get started with this. I'm going to open a new folder, and so this is going to be session 15. All right. And along the way, I'm also going to quickly show you creating a new environment, creating new Django project, because again, like I said, we are exploring the UI aspects of Django. So we are still, still talking about a Django project itself. So it's not a new framework or anything new. We already know this. We've been doing this for a very long time, right? So now the first thing is to create a virtual environment. So that's Python 3, right? Hyphen M, then VENV. That's a virtual environment, and we can call it whatever we want. So my world, for instance, this should create a virtual environment for me, right? Then we have to activate it. So we can say source, and then my world slash bin slash activate. Right? So this would hopefully activate it. In my case, you can see it is now active, right? So this is the activation. Then we can install Django. So Python 3, uh, pip install. I don't think we need Python 3. We can go for pip install Django. That should install Django for us. You might also, if this doesn't work, you can then probably go for a sudo command as well, but it works fine in my case. Now we don't really need anything else as such. So if you remember, we installed two more packages earlier. One was UUID for user identity, unique ID creation, and then there was REST framework. So as of now, I don't think we need any of them because we're not creating any models or anything in this one. This is a more front-end focused setup, right? Now, how things work here is very simple. We are going to create the same project. So let's create a new Django project. So that's Django admin, right? And again, this needs to be a Python 3, Python 3, Django admin, start app, start project, right? And then we can specify the project name. Let's call it my resume, for instance, right? And there we go. So Django admin, start project, my resume. So my resume gets created and it contains a couple of different files. Now we'll cd into it. So cd into my resume, and then we should be able to add a new app, right? So remember, a Django project is a container which contains multiple smaller apps inside of it. So here again, we can then go for Django admin, start app, and then let's call it resume. Okay, so this is my app within the project. So within my resume, we have created an app called resume. All right. So I hope this is absolutely clear by now. Let me know in the chat, clear, understood, yes, whatever. This should be very clear now. And you can also, if you want to follow along with me, I'll give you 2 minutes now. You can also quickly create a new project and put a ready in the chat. So once you're ready with the new project, we can get started. So you can take up to 2 minutes, right? Quickly set this up. Just put a ready when you're ready, and we can then start with the actual front end part. This is just, we have just created a virtual environment and created a new project, which we have done several times already so far. But yes, so that's what we have done just now. There is no code written yet, Chinu, right? There is no code I have written yet. So I'm not sure what you are asking for. I've just written commands so far, right? So the first command that we have, of course, is a new environment. So that's this one. That's VENV, and then my whatever. Then to activate it, I have to write source, then my world slash bin slash activate, then pip install Django, then Django admin, start project, my resume, then Django admin, start app. Oh, hold on. Then cd into my resume, then start app, then resume. So this is what I have written so far. Right? If you need these commands, I've given them in the chat now, so you can run them one by one. For Windows, the this command will change, right? Only the source command will change. You just have to write the direct path, not the source term. So just the path, and I think it should be a batch file. So it's something like this. You can just Google for it, Django Windows like that, or Python virtual environment Windows, and you should be able to find it. Okay. The final project you guys will be given by the team. I don't really know what the project is going to be. So the team will decide on the project and they will give you that one. That will be after these sessions. So you will get a separate timeline for the project, right? It's not like included in the sessions. It's a separate submission after sessions. So first you learn the technologies in the sessions and then you get some extra time. Like I'm sure there are a few weeks, like 3 4 weeks or so, where you can build the project itself. So that's a separate thing, which is for you. So while we are having the sessions, we have assessments for you to practice. And after the sessions are completed, then the team will give you a problem statement and you will have mentors and all of that. So they will guide you further, right? So you'll be split into groups. I think so. There are 3 to 4 people in one group and all. Again, the team will communicate all of this later. So there'll be groups made or something, and then there'll also be, you will have dedicated mentors for you so that they can help you and guide you further. So don't worry about that just yet, right? Please focus on the sessions for now because we still have 3 sessions to go and we have to revise a lot of different things. So done. I've created a new app, all right, and now I can go ahead and start working on this. So the way this works, right, the way the front end of the whole setup works is we have to create a new folder, right, which is called templates. So I'm going to do that. This needs to be within our app. I'm going to make a folder called templates. So this templates folder is going to contain our front end code or our UI code. So how Django works is when we are returning, right? Remember, so far, whenever we had returned anything, we were returning a JSON response, right? So far, whenever we have returned anything, we returned a JSON response, which was not able to open in the browser. So whenever we ran any of our previous Django projects, we had to test it in Thunder Client because the data was not returning in the browser. Simple, because the browser understands HTML and we are not returning in HTML, we are returning in JSON. But this time, what we want to do is we want the browser to understand what we are returning, and hence we have to return in HTML, right? So in this case, what we will have is within our templates, we will have 2 files. The first file will be index.html. This is going to be the home page that we have. And then we will have another file, which is going to be resume.html. So in the first file, we'll show a form. Once the form is filled, right, we will then show the preview and the download button in the resume HTML file, right? So I'll show you some parts of this and then I will ideally expect you to, uh, you know, like create some parts of this. So that's how the setup is going to be. But either way, the idea is we can, go ahead and create them like this. So first, let us understand the structure, how this works, how do we return this and all of that. And then we'll start working on the HTML itself. That's going to be the majority of our revision, right? HTML and CSS. So the first thing that we have to do now for this is we have to set up our URLs. So now once we have created a resume, first we go to project settings and we will add that app to the installed apps list, right? So this is resume so that the project will recognize our app. That's one. The second thing that we have to do is we have to then go ahead and set up the URLs for this, right? So the URLs again need to be set up in the main project folder where we have the URLs file, and the setup is going to be here. So let me scroll down, right? And after this, we can just add on or maybe remove this admin part. Either way, we don't need it. But of course, we will here, of course, import the views later on. And then we will add our path. So we'll add 2 paths. The first part will be, for instance, resume, or rather the first part will be home, which will be empty, right? And here we will call it home. So this is going to be the view, and then we'll say name is equal to home. So this is going to be one part of it. And then the second path that we want is a resume path. So this is where the second page will be after you click on submit, where the preview will be shown. So here we will have a view called generate resume, something like this. and then the name will be resume. So this is going to be our setup for the URLs. We still have to create the views, but this is our URL setup, right? And then we can create the views accordingly. But before we go to the views part, we have to first set up the HTML. Right? So let us go ahead and work on the HTML part now. So now the question for you is to get started with HTML, right? So I'm going to put this in. And again, it's a standard HTML document. So let's call it home page or something, right? So that we understand what is going on. And so yes, we have added the home page now, and this is where we are going to write our HTML. So it's a typical, standard HTML sort of a template. And again, the idea is to just understand this and create our basic HTML over here. Along with this, what we also want to do is we want to be able to embed, or we want to be sort of able to insert some dynamic parts to this. So it's not that we just want it to be um, like just HTML. But if you remember on the second screen, so if I go back to the output, this is the first screen where we have the form, so we can fill whatever details we want over here, right? So whatever details are filled, and then on the second screen we want these details to be carry forwarded, right? So I think it's not running right now, but we want the details to carry forward. So we don't want this to be like a dummy container thing, but it must have actual functionality. We should be able to transfer data from one page to the other. Right. So for that, we are going to set it up within the code also, and then within our views also. That's going to be the two major focus areas for this one. Right. So yes, let's go ahead and now focus on the HTML part. So let me give this to you as a quick challenge. What I will do is I will keep this UI sort of on the screen, and I want you to try to build. I'll just highlight the area, and I just want you to try to build that much, right? So let's say we just go for this section. Okay, so just the personal information, name, about, age, email, and phone. Okay, the challenge for you is, of course, you have to build this, but at the same time, the challenge for you is to try and build it. Let me just annotate this again, my bad. So till here, uh, till the phone part, not the skills, till the phone part, right? The challenge for you is you have to try to add validations to it. So in this one, if you see, there are no validations. Even if I leave it empty, it will still work, right? So the challenge for you is to try to add some validations to it, wherein we should not be able to enter, like the form should not submit if any of these fields are missing. So all of these fields are required fields or mandatory fields. And then of course, age must be a number, email should take a valid email, phone should be a 10-digit number, right? And name and about can be anything. Maybe you can use even text area for about, right? So that's a bigger piece of text. So I'll give you about 5 minutes. It's 7:55. I'm sorry, um it's 5:55, right? So I'm going to um so I'll wait for about 5 minutes or so for you to try this out. Just put a ready in the chat, right? Once you are ready, or once you are done with this, and then I will show you the solution, of course, and then we'll move to the next part. Okay. So for everybody who's asking the topic, today is revision session 1. That's our topic. So topic is revision session 1. Okay. I have written the topic in the chat. Please, hopefully, ask it again. But yes, so revision session 1, 2, and 3. That's going to be the topics for the next 3 sessions, right? So again, I'm waiting for 5 minutes for you to try this out. And once you're done, just put a ready, done, completed, something in the chat, and then we'll continue. Okay, so the time is up. Hopefully you are done with this, right? Hopefully you are done with this creation of HTML. Very simple, right? We've already covered this in the first couple of sessions, if you remember. So if I just share my screen again and we go back to our page, so it's empty right now. It's a standard typical HTML page. There's no issue with it, and we just have to write again basic HTML. So let's start with the first section. I'll not make everything here, but I'll just show you a couple of things, right? So first up, we have to follow the semantic structure of HTML. So if you remember, we had a discussion on semantic tags, and these are basically tags that are meaningful and make sense as opposed to using tags that don't make sense. So for example, HTML has this tag called div, which is basically a container. But in HTML5 we have a better tag called header, which makes more sense, right? Header and footer indicate that we're talking about the top and bottom of the document and stuff like that, as opposed to just calling it a div. So that's the first thing. So I'm using header here. Now within the header, we will try to put one title, which is going to be an H1, and that will be resume builder. Or we can just say, something like build your resume quickly, something like this, or build your resume fast, whatever, right? And again, we just can't see it yet, not just yet. You can directly run it if you want to open with live server. It should show up, just so that you get an idea of what you're making, but it's still not connected to Django just yet. Okay, so that's the idea, right? For people who have not attended the HTML sessions or have missed the first couple of sessions, again, if you go to the GitHub repository, we already have, like, I've already given you all the recordings as well from the previous session. So if you haven't attended, the sessions yet, the first couple of sessions, you can just go and watch the recordings. They are all mentioned over here, right? So that's where we discuss this basic HTML, right? So again, we are basically this entire thing without the header, of course, is the HTML boilerplate, like we call it, which is the bare minimum code which we have to write for HTML. So if you remember, this is available with a single line called exclamation and tab. That's it. So this gives us the entire boilerplate, and then we can change it to whatever we want. And so resume builder home, whatever, and then we can add our code. Right? So now when it comes to the HTML code, we have already talked about, we have already talked about the basic HTML tags. So there is a concept called semantic HTML, which is basically the idea that the code that we write should be meaningful. It should make some sense. So that's what we are trying to do here. And yes, so what we want to do in this case is we want to split our code into several sections, right? So if you remember, if you take a look at the output, which we have, this output, so we can split it into sections, like personal, like this name here can be header, then personal information can be one section, skills can be one section, education can be one section, projects can be one section, etc. So I'll not make everything here, but we'll try to split it into sections, right? Now to make those sections or to make the code more meaningful, better, we have a couple of tags which were added in the latest version of HTML, which is HTML5. So up until HTML4, there was no concept of semantic HTML, and we could pretty much, write the code however we wanted, even though it did not make a lot of sense. But with HTML5, we are now able to, we were now given some tags that make more sense. So for instance, we have tags like header, we have tags like section, we have tags like footer, for example, as opposed to using just a single container, which was div. So div was the only container available earlier. So instead of using div, we should be using header. Okay. And then after the header, we can have several sections, whatever, however many we want. And then we can wrap it with a footer. Okay. So this is a much more meaningful code. because when you read this, you know that header is going to be the first section on the page, the top section on the page, and footer is going to be the last section on the page. So everything in between is effect like everything on the page is between header and the footer. So this is the first thing, last thing, and there can be as many sections as you want. Okay. Now in our case, the header for now is going to be very simple. It is just going to contain a heading, okay, which is H1, and it will then probably contain a title or whatever. So we can say build your resume fast. So this is our title. And I hope this makes sense now. So I've repeated the whole thing, hopefully slower than I would typically. So I hope this makes sense now, right? So this is one. And then of course we can continue to customize it if we want. So I want to add a little more CSS, like a background image and all of that to it. So I'll probably add another H3 here, right? Which is going to be worried about creating resume on your own. And then we can add a button. Um, we are here to help, whatever, right? So we can just do it like this, and this can probably be there. And we can just add a button then, which is going to be build now. So this is our call to action, the CTA button. And again, it looks very simple for now, plain simple like this. But of course, we will come back to this and we will style it in a minute. Okay, but this is going to be our HTML header section. Now, what do we want here is we want to add some CSS to this. And if you remember, we have talked about three different ways of adding CSS. The first CSS way is to add an external file. So we can create like an external sheet, which is typically the best case scenario. So we can create a sheet called styles.css, and then we can link it. So in our HTML, we can add link to the header like this link, and then href will be styles.css. This is one way to do it. And typically in projects where we have a lot of pages, let us say we have 20, 30, 50, 100 pages in a project where the styling is going to be similar across pages. So let us say that we want to maintain consistency, so all our pages should look the same more or less. In those cases, we go for something like this, right? However, in this particular case, our situation is different. In this particular case, our situation is that we only have two pages and both of them are going to look completely different, right? The first page is going to be a form and the second page is a preview. So they are going to look completely different from each other. So that's why we can simply use internal CSS over here, right? So for internal CSS, we can use the style tag, and whatever CSS we want can go within this style tag. All right. So again, buttons are used because we want the user to be able to perform an action. So we can detect the button click and we can perform some action on it using JavaScript. That's effectively why we're using the button over here. So once they click on the button, we'll scroll them down to this section, which is going to be the resume creation. Right? So we'll just scroll it down to that section effectively in this case. But we can add any more, like any other action that we would want the user to be able to perform. All right, great. Now let's quickly discuss a couple of styles, and this is a quick challenge for you. I'm just going to ask you a couple of styles really quickly, and I want you to be able to just give it in the chat. Right, so I'll just tell you we need to do this, and I want you to quickly respond with which CSS style or property do you think will be good here, right? So the first question for you is I want to add an image to this header, right? So let's just get an image quickly. Let's go for a sketch probably, and I'll just look for a resume instead so that we get a proper looking resume. Okay, I think this looks good to me. So I will just right click and okay, this is a plus image. No worries, we can just copy image address. Okay, And then of course we can create a folder here, images, and I'll just paste it inside the folder. So we don't really need a folder because we're using a web image, so we can add it. All right, great. Now the question for you is, how do we add this image to our to the background? So we want the header to contain that image as a background. So can you tell me what syntax, what code, which property do we use in CSS to add that image? It's not source, it's not image. We don't want to add the image on HTML. We want to add the image in the background of the header. So it's not a part of HTML, it's a part of CSS. No. Okay, so I'm not sure, but nobody's answer is correct. So far, everybody has given an incorrect answer. So take the header like this. We use the header selector, HTML selector, and then the property is background image. Then here we have to provide the URL like this, right? So this is how we can add a background image in CSS. So we have written this header, which is our HTML selector. Okay, and then we have the background image, and then we have URL. So this is the link to the image. If it's a local image, we have to then provide a local link. For example, if there's an images folder where the images, so we say images slash name.png, whatever the image name and extension is. Otherwise, we can give the entire URL, right? So now with this, hopefully our image shows up in the background. It is tiny, but it shows up. So far, so good. Now, the next question for you is quickly in the chat. How do we create more space so that the image is better visible? So how do we just add some space over here in this header again? No, no frames, no div, no BR. That is all HTML. We are talking about CSS. Margin is not exactly correct. Margin would add space outside the element. So what I want to do is, for people who are saying question is incorrect, I want some more space over here so that the image takes up more space. So I just want some space within this header, like spread it out so that we have more space inside the header for the image. A margin is this space outside the element and not inside. So margin is not the right answer to this. Again, box sizing might work, sure, might work, but not the best approach. Height width could be done again, height width can work, but again, not the best approach. Okay, so we did no, it's not background repeat either, but yes. So I remember telling you with margin, we have another property called padding. Okay. Padding is the space between the content. So if I just add a 50 pixels padding, you can see now it's spreading out further. And let me just add a little more padding, say 150 pixels. You can see now it's bigger, right? We have one more property which I'm going to use, which is going to be image position, and I want it to be at the top. Okay, let's try center. Okay, much better. So this, I just wanted the image to look like a paper image, paper part of the image, right? So this is the setup. We can say background position center, and then padding is what I was looking at. So padding is effectively the space within the element, right? And then margin would be the space outside the element. All right, great. Now the next question for you is, how can we bring this to the center? So it's now on the left side. I want it to be in the center. All the three things, H1, H3, as well as our button. How can we bring it to the center of the header? Display flex will not center it. We will need more things with it to center it. But yes, text align will work perfect. So text align center, that's it. This should bring everything to the center like you can see. Great. Okay, so far so good. Now the next question is we want to increase the size of the font. So it's a little small. I want to make it bigger now. So what property can be used to increase this to make the font bigger? Font size. Perfect. So we have font size. Let's go for 32 pixels. Now this will work on everything, right? So you can see everything looks bigger, but we don't want it on everything. So I'll change it to H1 only. So header H1 and then change the font size to 32 pixels. I'll probably use another font for the H3, right? So this will be, let's say 26 pixels or something, so that we have difference in the fonts as well. So let's go for 36 probably, and 30 here. Okay, looks good to me now. So yes, this is the next bit where we have added the font size. Perfect. The next question for you is, now we are on to the button. Okay, so now we are styling the button, and this needs to be inside the header space button. And now the next question is, how do we add the change the color to the button? So yes, padding I'll add, no problem. 10 pixels, 20 pixels should look good now. Yes, so how do we add the color? How do we change the color of the button? That's the next question for you. It's not color. Color will change the font color. We don't want the font color. We want to change the background. So how do we do that? That's too big. Okay, this looks good. Uh, okay. Yes, Akash. So pixels are being used because we are currently working only on one device and not focusing on responsiveness so much. But if you're focusing on responsiveness, like a mobile version or a tablet version, then you might go for percentage, you might go for EM, REM, those other units. But since we are primarily focused on a laptop view, we are going to do this. A BG color, Akash, is only available for the body tag. It's not a CSS style. There is nothing called BG color in CSS. It is background color. BG is available only for the body like this. So this is an attribute available in HTML. It's not a CSS style. Okay. But yes, so background color we can definitely add, and let's add a black color. Probably we can invert it. So background black, and then the color will be the font color or the text color. So this can be white. Okay, perfect. Now the next question for you is, we want rounded borders for it. So like I want to change the borders to a rounded version. So how can I do that? Border radius, perfect, on point. So border radius 15 pixels. And done. Looks good. I'll also set the border to none here so that it should not have that line which we were seeing, the gray line. And finally, I want to remove this space as well. So if you see, there is some space on the left and on the top and on the right as well, right? If you see, there's some space, some white space. So to remove this, we can set the body margin or the global selector, like the universal margin, to 0. So this is how that space can be removed. So we can either apply to the body or to the universal selector. So see, when we apply to the universal selector, everything else also messes up. All the default margins are gone. So we could go for body. That will only get rid of that extra space, and the rest of it stays the same. All right. So how to make the background color transparent? So Mohammed, there is a color available called transparent. So if you just change the background color to transparent, simple as that. You can see now it's gone. So it is now transparent. Right? So there's a direct color available called transparent. Right? But again, we wanted black in this case. Perfect. The next question for you is to now add some hover to it. So I will do that. I will give you the hover bit like this. Now we want to reverse it or invert it, right? So I'll copy these two styles. So I'll change the background color to something else, probably green or something. And I'll change the color to black. Let's see how this looks. Not 100% sure Okay, this probably looks good on white only. And then I'll choose a darker shade, probably like a purple, very dark purple or something. So just to see some contrast here. So when I hover over it, you can see the color changing very slightly, but it does indicate, that it is changing. So I think that looks good. The final question in this part is I want the mouse pointer to change to a hand, like a link clickable thing when I hover over it. So what is the style for that? So like we want it to look like a click pointer thing. So what can we do for that? Tell me the CSS property first, then the value of it is fine. But which property do we use? Cursor pointer. Perfect. So we have this property called cursor. We can change it to pointer. So now if you look at it, in the rest of the places, the mouse pointer is normal. But when we hover over the button, it turns this click into this click thing, right? So that's what we wanted. Perfect. So I think this looks good. We could change the color, but I think it looks good for now. I also want to add a quick custom font to it. So I haven't shown this to you yet, but we can go to this website called fonts.google.com. Again, I will list it down in the chat as well. Okay. How can we assign? It's Mohammed, you can just create as many buttons as you want with the button tag. Right? So just like this, and then you can add different functionalities to it. We'll do that in some time, right? Great. So now we want to add a custom font. For this, we go to a website called fonts.google.com, and here you have hundreds of fonts that you can choose from. So I want to take something simpler, but I'll just show you how to add it so that you are also able to add a custom font. So let's go for, uh, okay, I want to add a filter here, which is going to be serif fonts. And mm, okay, this is good. We'll go for this one, probably for now, Zilla Slab. For this, we can click on the Get Font button on the right, and this will give us embed code. So we can click on Get Embed Code, right? And then we just want to link it. So we have to copy these three things, just like we add a normal CSS link in a similar way. So I'll just call it font and paste it. So we get three links from Google, which will add the font for us. And then we can set this in our font family. So if you check the code also, you will see here font family Zilla Slab. That's what we just want. So I'll take that and I will add it to our CSS. So I'll probably change H1 only, and that should do it. So now if I just go back and check, we should have a different font. As you can see, the H1 now has a different font. We could experiment with it a little more. We can add a background color, maybe black, and the text color could be white, just so that it is more visible on that image. Um, you know, and we can experiment with this if you feel like it. I mean, of course, that's something for you to figure out. But yeah, I think it looks good either way. So I'll just leave it at this and probably just reduce the margin to about 50%. Uh, oh, that's not sure what went wrong over there. But yes, so we can just add a margin to say 100 pixels just to see how that looks. Okay, it's working like that. Got it. So we can just keep reducing it if we want, right? And you can just set it the way you want to. But I'll leave it at this. This looks pretty good. You can similarly customize this text also, and maybe play with the button a little more as well. But this is a new CSS aspect that we have explored now. Adding background images and adding custom fonts. So again, for adding custom fonts, we go to this website called fonts.google.com. Over here we then choose which font we want. So you can either scroll through the list and pick one, or you can filter. So you can see, and whatever you type here will be changed, right? So whatever you type, it will show you how it looks in that font. So you can pick whichever font you want here, and then click on the button on the top right which says Get Font. Once you click on this button, you can click on the first option, get embed code, right? Here you will get the links, copy these links to your head tag, and then you get an example usage as well. Just copy this font family part and you should be good. So this is how we can add a custom font to our page. Again, it's free to use, right? Google Fonts is absolutely free to use. So there's no money needed as such. Perfect. So this is our setup with the font as well. And I think I'm pretty happy with the header now. We can, of course, maybe style this as well, but it looks pretty good to me so far. So I just want to reduce that margin a little bit, but I'm not sure why it's not working how it is supposed to work. Okay, now we are looking at this. So this is what I wanted to do actually. I just wanted to reduce the padding, like reduce that border. So now it looks much better. I think I should have put a 0 first, which I missed out. So if we put two values here, then the first value is the top and bottom spacing. And then the second value is the left and right spacing. So when we say 0, 500, it means 0 from the top, 0 from the bottom, and 500 from the left and 500 from the right. So that's effectively what the style is or what we have specified. Right, great. Now the next part that we'll focus on is the actual form creation. So let's give it an ID of resume details, whatever it is, right? Or maybe let's call it personal details because that's the first section that we're going to have. Again, I'll just show you two, three things. We'll not spend more time on this part, but we will spend more time on the functionality, like how to read this data, how to show it back, all of that stuff, right? Now, the first thing here is going to be the form tag, right? And this action we will specify in some time. We want something to happen when the form is clicked. So we will specify that. And then after that, we can continue with our setup, right? So let's add personal info here. And the first field that we want, so it can be in a div, and this will be input type equal to text. All right. Now the next question for you is I want the name. The first field is going to be the name. So I'll add a label for it and let's call it first name. And I want to reduce this. Okay. I want to reduce this to 25 characters. Right? I want to reduce this 25 characters. So what can I add over here? Like which attribute can I add over here to reduce it to 25 characters? Right. So yes, the question is like how do we restrict this? How do we restrict this input to only take 25 characters maximum? Which attribute can we use to reduce it to 25 characters? Any idea? Length is half the name. There should be something before it as well. So we have something called max length, right? Max length and min length. So max length 25 would mean a maximum of 25 characters, and then min length would mean whatever minimum. So minimum is, I mean, you can have minimum one or two for the first name because there should be some value. It should not be empty. And then we also add this attribute called required. So required would mean that you have to fill this, otherwise the form will not proceed. Right? You cannot proceed further without it. Right? Perfect. So this is one input. and we also have to give it a name attribute. So this is how we can connect to the backend as well. Again, we'll get to this is later. Done. Now the next field, again, I'll keep it very simple for now. So we'll just have first name, last name, and email, probably those things, to begin with. So here, first name, that's the label. Your last name is our label. All right, so last name there, and there. We'll keep the rest of it similar. Then the third field that we want is going to be email. So this is a problem. Hold on. User email, and this should be the ID here. This is not needed, my bad. And same with this one. The for can contain the ID. We do need to explicitly specify that. Okay, looks good. Now the third thing is going to be the user email. All right, so we'll call it email like that. And over here also, I'll just add a colon just to make it better in terms of the output. And finally, this is going to be the ID. This is going to be the name. And now we have to also change the type to email, right? So we have a built-in formatting for email available in HTML. So it will automatically validate it for email, right? It will automatically validate it for email. Done. So this is our setup. First name, last name, email. Let's check the output. It looks terrible for now because we have not added any CSS here, but it does show up, right? And finally, of course, we will add a submit button at the very end after we add maybe one more section. Then we'll add the submit button. Great. Now, what we can do is we can quickly try to style this. So let's start with the style quickly. And again, so we'll start with the form styling. We can probably give it a border of 1 pixel to, surround it on all sides. So that is something we can do. We can probably give it to the section instead of the form, I think. So, okay, the next question for you quickly is how can we access this section in CSS? How can we select this section in CSS? Which selector should we use to get this section? So just like, we have added our HTML selector over here. Yes, ID. So with the hash, perfect. So we can go for a hash, personal details. That should select the section for us. And we are now adding a 1 pixel border to it. Uh, all right, personal detail. Not 100% sure if the border is showing up, but let me. Oh yes, we did not add the color. So black, and it should show up now. There you go. A border shows up. Perfect. We can add a margin to it. So maybe 50 pixels and then, okay, zero, probably 50 pixels on all four sides and then 100 pixels on the borders. So like this, right, to make it look more like what we want it to be. Oh, yes. So this, if you look at the actual output that we're looking at, there is this border around the form, right? So that's effectively what we're trying to create over here as well. We can add a little more of a background radius to it, probably 10 pixels or so. And then we can add a little more padding, right? So let's go for some 20 pixels and we should be good. Okay, looks pretty same, pretty similar to the actual border. I think the color is a little off. We can just reduce the transparency a little, like the opacity a little, and that should do it, I guess. So yes, this looks almost the same. Great. Now the next bit, if you see, is that these input fields are longer, right? So for that, we can simply add the width or change their width to 100%. So for this, we can just style the input field like this, and we can have the width to 100%, something of this sort. And you can see now they are longer as well. And similarly, we can style the labels, label tags. So the question for you is, how do we make them bold in CSS? So I just want to make the label bold, right? If you see the output here, these are bolded. Name is bold. So how do I do that? How do I change this to a bold text? Font weight. Perfect. So we have a CSS style called font weight, right? And we can make it bold like this. We can also give it a value between 100 to 900, but that also depends on the font. So you can either say bold, bolder like that. We also have bolder, which will make it even more like even blacker if the font supports it. So there are values ranging from 100 to 900, and we can check these values when we add the font. So if I go back to fonts.google.com, I pick a font here. So you can see in this that there are so many options, right? Like thin 100, light 300, regular 400, medium 500. So these are all values that we can give. Right? So bold and black. Black is extra bold. So depending on the font that we have picked, we can choose the numbers between 100 to 900 like that, or we can then just add like medium, bold, that kind of stuff. So I'll go for bold here and done. The next thing that we want is the label should have a little bit of, not the label, the input should have a margin, so that the next input is spaced a little, further down here. So we don't want the margin to be on the left and right, only on the top, or rather only on the bottom. So we can just say margin bottom and 10 pixels. Right? So this should fix it 20 pixels. Okay, looks good. And then similarly, I will add it a little bit of a margin between the name and the input field. Right? So you can experiment with this, of course, and get it to the way you want it to be. But again, that's up to us. So I think this looks good to me now. You can spend more time on this, and you can probably change the text and font and colors, but I leave it at this. Okay, so now the next important part that I want here is, I don't want to make another section. We'll keep it very simple. I will just add a submit button to it. So that should just take us to the next page, right? So that will be input type equal to submit, and that should add a submit button. Perfect. Now, of course, we want to style this separately because we don't want the button to be, like so big and all. So we can probably change it. So that will be input, and then in square brackets, we can put type equal to submit. This is going to be our selector for the button. And we can probably reuse the existing styles that we had for the previous button. So I'll just put a comma, and you can now see it looks the same as build now, right? We can also add the same hover effects, right? So again, this is how we can choose an like a proper button, input button, input type equal to submit. Right, done. Uh, Okay, I'm not sure why it's always shown hover, but that's fine. And we can also then add a width. We can reduce the width down to 20% or whatever. So it comes back to its size, its original size, like this. And I think I'm happy with this for now. This looks good to me, right? I'll probably remove the hover effect. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. So that's fine. And then I can add a custom hover effect here. So let's add a hover. I think since it's input, it's probably behaving like that. It's not a normal button, but an input field. So that's probably why it's behaving in that way. But either way, doesn't really matter. I just want the pointer if possible. Okay, much better now. This looks the same now. Perfect. Now, what we want to do is we want to do two things. Number one, we have to create a view for this so that the user is able to access it. And then number two, we want to create the second page where we feed this data, right? So basically the user will come to this page, they will click on, like they will fill the fields, whatever it is, and they can click on the submit button. Now, for now, it will of course ask us for the validations, but once we submit it, nothing will happen for now, right? So yes, correct. We have to fill in this action field now. Okay. Now the way this works, right, or the way this is going to work rather, is that we have to basically focus on the action aspect of it. So the action is going to be the URL that we specify in our URLs file. So effectively, we just want to redirect it to the corresponding URL. Right. So remember in our URLs, we added two things. So from home, we want to go here to the resume URL. So for this, what we can do is we can write it in a proper format. So action is going to be in curly brackets. We put two percentages like this, and within this we can type in where we want it to go. So we say URL and then resume. This is it. So this is the format. You can see now it becomes clickable, and it's going to basically allow us to set this up. So this is going to be our setup. So URL resume is what we are looking at. Yes, so we have added our URL here, right? And if we check our URL, so this resume is what we are looking at. Now, for this or to activate this or enable this, what we need to do is we need to basically provide or create a view which is going to contain these details, right? So what is going to happen when the user goes to the home screen and what is going to happen when they go to the second screen. So for this, we have to go to our views.py, and over here we have to create our view. So the first thing that we want to define is a home view, which is going to be the first screen. So request, and here we simply want to return the template that we have created. So that's going to be return, and then we can say render and then request the file name, which is index.html, along with the request. So we can pass it in as a parameter. So basically, this is telling the browser that the user is going to be able to send a request to that URL. Okay. So again, three things that we have done. Number one, we have added a URL here. So that's path in both for both files, for our index.html along with our resume.html. Then we are going to our index file and we are attaching the action like this. So effectively, it means when the form is submitted, please redirect to this URL, right? And finally, we are now specifying what to do. So first is this home definition. Let's see if this works, right? So this should allow us to open the page at least within our server. So now the first step here is to make migrations, right? And here we have to import that. So I'll comment this one out and we can say from views, from dot views import home. So should give us access to the view like that, right? Or if that does not work, then we can always go ahead and we can say from home.views import star. So that's another option that we have. So from home.views import star. So this should give us access to the home view. let's double check everything. So we are defining home and returning it. And now we should be able to access it like this. All right, now we're going to go ahead and make our migrations. So that's going to be Python 3 manage.py make migrations to see. Okay, it says no module named home. Oh yes, our module is not home, it is resume. So from resume.views import star. As soon as I do that, the error is gone. Now we can run make migrations, no changes detected. Perfect. So we can now change it to migrate. Right, done. So this is the setup. This is done. Great. Now the next thing that we will need or is to run the server. So let's clear this and then Python 3 manage.py run server. Right, you can now see the server is running. So we can now go ahead and open the browser. Let me share the screen with you again here, and we can start the browser. So copy and paste it. And this time around, the same file should hopefully show up. We'll check it, but it should show up over here. So it says reverse for resume, not for. Yes, that makes sense. So we don't have this path just yet. So we can remove this action for now. And now you can see in a server, this is not a normal HTML file. See, this is HTML, my resume slash resume templates. This is the HTML version, but now this is the proper server version, right? So we have now been able to successfully render our template on the front end, right? We have now been able to successfully render our template, which we have created to the front end. All right, so this is our setup. The next thing that we want to do is we also want to show the second page quickly. So let us quickly just set it up also. So let's call it your resume, right? And I'll just say H1 preview. I'll just do this much, okay, so that we are just able to see the page and connect the two. Then we'll focus on the functionality for the second page. So just like we have defined home here, we can define resume, and here we want to return the resume.html. So this is going to be gen resume, okay, because that's what we have specified in our URLs here, and done. So now this should also show up, and we should also be able to add it to our form. So again, we'll add the same thing, percentage URL resume, done. So now if I click on this submit button, hopefully if we enter the details and something.com and submit, we should now be able to probably redirect to the second page or something. So you can see now that the form does get submitted, and we can see this with the help of the details in the URL, right? So this means that the form is working fine as well. So we are not getting that error now that resume is not found or whatever. All right, great. So now the last step that we have to do is to basically add that data coming from the form over here. So let's quickly get that done now. And that's effectively everything we are going to need for this application to work. All right. So now how do we add this? Well, we need to change a couple of things here. And the first is that within our template, we want to use a little more of um, dynamic content, right, as opposed to normal content. So that's one thing that we want to do. And then we also want to add that PDF functionality, probably. So again, that's something that you can get from external pages or external URLs. There's a resource called HTML to PDF, which can give you that thing as well, right? So that's going to be our setup. Okay, so now I'm going to copy or I'm going to just quickly set this up in a way that we are only able to see the details here. I'm not focusing on the CSS here, rather only on the functionality. So here the name that will correspond to our form fields must be used. So remember, in the form we have added this name attribute. So this is how the backend will recognize it, right? So we can use it like this. And then we can say last name, and we can say user email. So this is our setting. Okay, this is it. So once we do this and the form goes to this page, it should be able to read the data coming in, and it should be able to set this up. In addition to this, we have to do two more things. First, we have to set the form method to post. Okay. So the reason for this is because right now when we submit the form, the data is shown in the URL, and this is sensitive data. Right? These are user details. So we should obviously not be able to send this in the URL. We should not be sending this in the URL. We should be sending this hidden. It should not be publicly visible like that. Right? And then the final thing is we add this one token, cross-reference token, which is going to link the two pages together. Okay. So now what happens is once we submit the form and we reach the second page, it should ideally be able to show us the data for those fields coming from the form. All right. Then final step, we have to also modify the views logic. We don't just want to return the template, but instead we want to check if the method is post method. Then we want to be able to perform a few things. So we can say if request dot method equal to post. Okay, so if the method is post, which we have just set right here, if the method is post, just stop the server for a minute. So if the method is post, then we want to perform some logic. So if the method is post, then go inside the method. And what do we want to do here? Well, we want to get the details, right? So we can say that first name is equal to request dot post dot get. And what value do we want? Well, we want the first name. So that's going to be written first name, and then the next thing is empty. Just like this, we want the last name and the email. So last name and the user email. Right? So this is the last thing that we get. Okay, perfect. So this is our getting the data from the form, and then we want to sort of inject it. We want to inject it into our resume.html. So for that, we can say return. And then what do we want to return? We want to render request resume.html, and then we can forward the parameters like this. So again, we can map these things. So first name will be the first name, last name will be the last name, and so on. So again, we can give custom names here, but it's best to keep everything similarly, like same name, to avoid any kind of confusion. Then we have user email and finally user email. Done. If this does not work, then finally we can, maybe take them back to the home screen. So if it does not work or whatever, then we can take them back to the home screen. So for this, we can copy the same render. So view trap this one, and we can just paste it over here. So if it is not post request, then just take them back. That's it. Now let's run the same thing again. So make migrations, migrate, save site, and then run server. So hopefully this time around, once we send the data, we should be able to see it in the second page, right? So now let's check this out. So here is our code. Let me copy the URL here. So copy this, go to the browser, paste it. All right, perfect, shows up. Let's say my name, surname, hello@hello.com, something, and submit. So now once I submit this, you can see we are now taken to the second page, and we also are able to see our data, right? Now again, you can just change the UI to make the data look more appealing, and you can add all the other data fields as well. So I've just added 3 for now, but you can add 20, 50, 100 fields, whatever you want in the exact same fashion. So let me quickly repeat what we have done so far, and then I'll talk to you about those JavaScript extensions which we can use, to download the PDF and stuff like that. So the very first thing that we have done is this time around, we have created a templates folder, which we had not done earlier. Then in the templates folder, we have written our HTML, CSS code to create the UI for the form. Then we have just added two extra things to it. The first thing is these attributes, and the second thing is this token. The first attribute that we have added is called the action attribute. So action is going to basically go ahead and um, you know, take the user to whichever location we want the logic, we have the logic in. So in this case, we say URL resume. It basically means that take the user to the path which is resume. So if we check our URLs, it will basically take the user to this path, which is resume, and it is going to return this view called generate resume. Right? This is the view that we have written, generate resume. So effectively, this line of code is just telling the browser that when the form submits, please redirect to this URL. That's it. Then we have written the method. So method can take two values. There is something called the get method or the get value and the post value. So if you make a normal HTML form, kind of like what we have in the Google search, right? So if you just type something here, let us say we type Django, for example. So notice what happens here in the URL. If I type Django here, then you can see that our search query appears in this URL, right? We are redirected to the search view, and along that or alongside that, our query is also available in the URL. So effectively, whatever we type here is shown in the URL, which is not good for sensitive data. If it's a normal data, it's fine. But if we are sending email, phone number, debit card, credit card information, stuff like that, then obviously we cannot send it public like this. So what we have to do is we have to basically make the data private, okay, or make the data hidden, protected. That is done with the help of the post method. So if we keep it to get, then the data is public. And if we keep it to post, then it is secured. So it is, you can read also, if you just check here, it will also show you form data is included in the body of the form. And if I set it to get, it will go in the URL, URI. So we don't want it in the URL, we want it hidden. The user should not be able to see it. So we can set it into post. Then this token is just a cross reference between the two. So CSRF would mean that we are just trying to reference the two pages, and that's it. So now once the form is submitted, once the submit button is clicked, we are taken here to this page. Now this is where Python kicks in, and that CSRF token will basically allow us to insert dynamic values like this. So what we're doing is if we put double curly brackets or double flower brackets, we are able to embed custom values, dynamic data within HTML. So whatever we write here will still stay, obviously. Along with this, along with this, so that data will be permanent. Along with this, whatever comes from the form will be dynamically embedded using these double curly brackets. So we have three of those data items here, and that's how we are reading data from the form. The logic for this reading data is written in the view. So in the view, we are saying in the home page, we don't want to check anything. If it's a request for the home page, just return the file. That's it. So remember here, when we were working with the JSON data earlier, we were returning response. Right? We were returning something called response, which was basically the JSON data that was being returned. But here we are rendering. So this is render. Render means show on the screen. Right? So earlier when we were discussing Django, we were only discussing the Python, the backend part of it. This is how we can respond with the front end. This is how we can render the UI. Right? So we are telling which template to show. Then in the second case, we still want to render something, right? We still want to render the resume file, but we want to make sure that only if the request is post will it show. So if the request method is post, we can also check for get similarly, right? If request.method equal to get, but in this case, we want it to be post. So then we are extracting the data coming from the form. Again, we are sending this data with the name attributes. So this name value can be used to extract the data. So this is how it connects to the backend. Right? So we are saying get first name, get last name, get email. Then within our template, which is this template, we are embedding this data, this curly brackets data, with the help of the view here. So we are saying render the resume.file and fill in these values. So replace first name with the first name, right? So then this first name will be replaced by whatever first name is coming from the form. This will be replaced by whatever last name is coming. And similarly, this will be replaced with whatever email is coming from the form. If it is not a post request, if it is anything else, the user opens it by mistake, opens it directly, whatever it is, simply take them back to index, right? So if I just directly try to open it, you can see it still opens the index for me, right? If I directly try to type it in the URL, it opens the index. However, if I fill the form, right? So whatever it is, then it will take me to the correct page. So we also have that error handling in place, that even if somebody tries to open it directly by mistake, then they should not be able to open it. If they directly able to open, like if they directly try to open it, we are still showing them the index template only, right? So this is how the whole setup can be done. Now, of course, I will be giving you this code in GitHub. I will upload this in some time, but this is how we can work with returning HTML, CSS from the front end. Coming to the JavaScript aspect now. So I'll quickly show you two things. One, I want to show you the button scroll. So basically, when we click on this button, build now, our control should go down to the form. So that's the first thing that I want to show you. And for that, we need to add some more content. We need to create more space so that there is something to scroll down to, right? So I'll just add some content. Now, of course, this is not option. This is completely optional, but I just want to, quickly go ahead and quickly do this so that we are able to understand the setup. So I'll just add a few things quickly so that, we just create some scroll over here, right? So just adding a little bit of scroll so that we have something we can visually see that it is scrolling down. That's just it. And copy this and I'll paste it after the form as well, just to create some space, all right, under the form as well. So now we should have some data after the form as well. um yeah, I think I replaced the section with it, which is fine. I think it should be fine, no problems. So yes, we have some data. Now we should be able to see the scroll properly. So that's good. Now let's go ahead and work on that scroll. So very simple. To scroll within the same page in HTML, first of all, we have to give it an ID. So whichever area we want to scroll down to, in this case, it is personal details. We need to have an ID, right? Then we can create a simple A tag. We can wrap it in a simple A tag. So within the button, I will wrap the button within the A tag and then just give the ID over there. That's it. So this is how we can make it scrollable with the single page. So I'll wrap the button with the A tag, right? And now when I click on it, it should ideally scroll. You can see when I click on the button, build now, it basically pulls up this part at the top automatically. It automatically brings up that part to the top, right? So this is how we scroll. And you can also see this in the URL bar. So if you see the URL bar here, this is our home page, right? So if you notice this URL right now, it's just 8,000. Once I click on this button, you can see it changes to 8,000 slash hash personal details. So this indicates that we are now moving to that section, or that section is now focused or highlighted on the screen. That's what we are indicating with the help of this hash personal details. That's the URL, okay, within the same page. That's how we can scroll within the same page. So I'm sure you might have seen these one page websites, right? Where you have several options and they are all on the same page. Like you don't really have 3 to 4 pages. We just move around on the same page. So this is how we can make those kind of things. We just have to give the ID wherever we want to scroll. Okay. And then just connect the link like this. So instead of giving another file name here, like template.html, whatever, we can just give it a link with the hash. The same way we detect IDs in CSS, we can just specify that. So they should scroll within the page, right? The final thing that I want to quickly discuss before we take more questions or before we get the attendance link is this thing called HTML to PDF. So there are a bunch of these tools that are available which allow us to quickly, let's say, print, right? You can see HTML to PDF converts any web page into a printable PDF. So we have this already written for us. We don't really have to write it on our own. You can see, all of this is already there. So we can view this on GitHub also. You can see the documentation, the usage, getting started, everything is here. And you can also see open browser, paste this in the code, etc., etc. And you can see that there are so many options, customizations, whatever it is. You can also see the parameters. So like you can set the margin, file name, whatever. So it's very, very simple. Just like this, we also have other usages or other files available. For example, we have also something called data tables, which basically converts a any HTML table into every option that you want. Like it will automatically enable search. It will automatically give you these options, sorting, filtering, everything, right? You don't have to do anything. You just have to include these files if you want the styling from there or JavaScript file and just initialize it like this. That's it. So, these are the kind of things that we should be very aware of, because when we are making projects, especially custom projects, say you are building a portfolio or you're building something for yourself, you can easily integrate these things like really quickly. Very simple. You can just go to getting started. You can see the simplest way is to add the script. Okay. And then you can just go ahead and call the method. That's it. And you can see the script here. So if you just open the script, this will give you the JavaScript code. If you just copy the script and open it in the browser, you can see this is the entire JavaScript code for the functionality, and we don't have to write it because it's already written for us. Right. So that's effectively everything that we need. Very simple. And this is the usage. Once installed, you just have to select the element to be printed and just call the function. That's it. So let's try this out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and copy the CDN. So I'll just copy the script. I will put it in my resume.html. Okay, so typically again, we add JavaScript to the end of the file. I'll just call a button. I'll make a section. We need to have a container where all the data is so that it can be printed. Right. So that's our section id equal to print this. Okay. And then we can add a button which will call the function. So here or download. So download this, for instance, and then we can set a button on click equal to, we can add some logic here. So this is going to be our click functionality, right? So now for this, let's call an anonymous function, and then we can call this one. As you can see here, it's all written for us. So that's it. We just have to take the element and then print it. So we can say this element is equal to get element by ID. We want the ID to be download this. So this is my ID. I will just replace it. That should be it. Let's see if this works or not. So let's go to our page. Let's reload this and let's fill this in. So let me just add some details. Submit. Okay, perfect. Download, and it should automatically kick in, right? You can also check the console for it, and I think it's because of the code not written properly. But yes, I mean, I don't think the on click is working here. Yes, I think we should make it in a separate function and then call it here. So let's do that. Say my script.js, for instance. We can also create a script tag directly. So we can just, instead of having a separate file, we can just say function, download this, and like this. And then we can attach the function on click, download this. So this should also be fine. Again, depending on the setup, it should work. And if there are any errors or something, that should then show up in the console for us. So either way, we can just read the documentation, and yes, we should be able to get this done. We should now do this, refresh. Okay, I'm not 100% sure why it's not working, but ideally this is how we would make it. So we are just calling the function HTML to PDF, which should be like, which is available in this script which we are referring to over here. So should actually be okay. Right. So that's how we can also connect to these external resources. Now it's working, right? You can see. So if I did not put these brackets, that's the problem. So now when I click on the download button, you can see it gives me a file.pdf. And if I try to open it, should hopefully open it. You can see this is a PDF now with our details, right? So that's it. This is how we can use these tools. We have data tables and we have a lot of other tools like image conversion, image to PDF, all these things which are open source, which means that they are made by other developers and then put out free, to be used by everyone. So that's how these things basically work, right? So this is how the setup is. And now I am open for questions. So what I will do is I will just take 1 more minute to upload the code on GitHub, so that you have access to it right away. And in the meanwhile, if you have any doubts, questions, whatever it is, just let me know in the chat and I will help you out with it. So I'm just going ahead and uploading this so that you have access to it right away. And then whatever doubts or questions you have, I'll just answer them. And again, so that's the first session in this revision series for us, and done. So it's uploaded now. I will give you the link in the chat. Okay, done. So the links are now in the chat. The GitHub link is now in the chat. Please update it, or please check the repository. I will add the recordings as well. The remaining recordings, I think the previous 2 sessions are left. I'll add those here. But session 13 is here. Session 13, my resume, it's again under the first session before session 2. That's how GitHub naming works. So one gets more preference, right? So it's 1, 3. So that's why it's here. Again, I've added everything over here, so you can go ahead and check that out as well. Great. Now coming to the assignment question. So I see a lot of people asking me last date for assignment. So as far as I know, again, you can double check it with the team. But as far as I know, the last date for assignment submission is the last date of the internship, right? So it is basically like you have till the end of the internship to submit the assignment. As far as I know, that's the criteria. But again, ideally, you should try to submit it um, every week, because we are sending out one assessment or one assignment every week, right? So you should ideally be submitting it every week like that. Coming to the internship duration. So again, the idea is that we will hopefully wrap up the sessions by Monday next week or by like mid next week. And then you will have your other trainings, like your placement and all of those things. So that's where you will be told to make a project also. So you will have a deadline for that. You submit the project and then you will be ending the internship. So the project that you will build will again be a Django based project, which might include both front end and back end, maybe some database work as well, right? And that's going to be the end of your internship, right? So you can think of it like another month or so, till the so like August, mid-August or end of August is when we are looking at ending the internship, right? The project details will be shared with you later, Pujita. So I don't know the project yet. The team is still deciding. So once that is decided, they will share it with you. It's going to be something similar to what we have been doing, right? So we've been making these projects, right? Smaller projects. So yes, Goodreads is coming in the next session. I just wanted to discuss HTML, CSS first, which is why I took up this project. And then, of course, once we recap Django in the next 2 sessions, we'll talk more about Goodreads as well, right? So yes, that's the idea. And yeah, that's basically everything that you need to know for now. The attendance link is now in the chat, so you can go ahead and you can fill that in. The team has shared it in the chat. So please make sure you fill the feedback and give your attendance before you leave. And yes, if there is anything else, do let me know. Otherwise, that is it for this one. The topic for today is revision session one. Okay, revision session one. And we have two more sessions to go. So that will be revision session two and revision session three. If you are unable to log into TapTap or facing any other issues, please reach out to the support team. You have their WhatsApp number as well. You have their email ID as well. Just drop a message or give them send them an email and just give them 2 to 3 days to reply. Okay, don't expect a reply immediately because we have a lot of queries coming in. So give them 2 to 3 days at least so that they can help you out, right? So yes, that's effectively everything for today. Thank you so much, guys, for attending. I hope this makes sense. Let's meet again in the next session and continue from there. So yes, see you in the next one. Bye bye.